your breath, my bellows, my heart, your hearth. Today, we admit that we wished God would be louder. Today, we carry a new ember. Well, welcome to Embers, a Whisper and Flame podcast. My name is Michael, and I am the voice of Whisper and Flame, the voice that will guide you and journey with you these next 30 days. When your flame has burned down to embers, and all you can do is but whisper, you are welcome here. If you haven't yet, pick up a copy of Embers, 30 Days for Holding What Remains. It's a guided devotional journal that lets you encounter art and poetry and scripture and gives you a space to write your story for yourself. Visit our website, whisperandflame.store, or our Etsy shop, or Amazon. I'm a former staff pastor at an inner-city homeless shelter. I was a hospice chaplain working with patients facing the ends of their lives. I planted a church that welcomed deconstructing Christians before deconstruction was even a term. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." My dad smoked for years. The smell of Marlboro Lights, really any cigarette smoke, still takes me back to childhood. I like the smell. It smells like simpler times, malls and restaurants and friends' houses and backyard parties. Both of my parents smoked. I can picture them sitting at the kitchen table, both smoking together. They lived like this for years and years, until one day when I was away at college, I got a phone call that my dad had had a heart attack and that he was in the hospital, and I needed to come home. Turns out that he had gotten completely sick of cigarettes. He wanted nothing to do with them, but he had been smoking since the mid-70s. There was no real way he was going to kick the habit without the patch and a whole lot of work. Something told him to ask Jesus for help, and he did. That day he prayed, "Lord, please take this from me, and I'll never do it again." And he woke up the next day, I swear to you, and the craving was gone. It was done. And because he had been hooked since the 70s, his body wasn't ready for the shock of not having nicotine in his system anymore, and he had a heart attack a few weeks later. But he quit, and he stayed quit, and he hasn't touched another one, and this was 20 years ago. It's stories like that that inspire us. Miraculous moments of Jesus telling the sea to be quiet or telling my dad to be free. These stories lift us up. God being loud. That's what we want. If we're honest, when we pray to God, we want God to be loud and for God to speak a resounding yes. And when he does, stories like that inspire us. But they can also cause real disappointment when things don't work out the way we want them to. When God's answers are so soft that we miss them, or he speaks in a language we can't hear or understand. Or those awful moments where it's an obvious no instead of that resounding yes. We expect him to be louder, to speak our language. We expect him to do what we ask, and disappointment, over time, can fester into a wound that we struggle to heal from. The original church that spawned our church plan, the Outlier Project, was a unique animal. Our pastor there was a unique person. He didn't really believe in things like prayer or hope, and he was open about the reason why. He told us that one time at our old church building, the furnace died. There was no heat in the building, and the leaders there gathered together to pray that it would be fixed, or that God would find them the money to fix it. It was a small church with very little money, and no money came. And God did not fix the furnace, miraculously or otherwise. It stayed broken and cold all winter. The only relief that came for the church was when the weather turned. They had to have church with coats and hats and candles for months. He told us that that was the last moment that he believed in prayer. One time he got into a conversation with an atheist friend of his, and the atheist said, "If you prayed to God and I prayed to my toaster, I think the result would be the same." And our pastor said, "Yeah, I think you're right." That's what I think of most of all when I think of our former pastor. The toaster story. He got it wrong like all the rest of us do. He was expecting God to be loud and for God to say yes. God wasn't, and God didn't. What are we supposed to do when that happens? When what we perceive as God's silence becomes a wound for us, that begins to make us feel like he doesn't care about us at all. Have there been times when you've been disappointed with God? When he showed up when you didn't want him to, or he didn't show up in the way you expected him to? I've always wanted miraculous things to happen to me. I remember praying as a kid to jump up from my trampoline and fly in the air, and I would go help people like Superman, "Please, dear God." And God was quiet about that one. It was pretty obviously a no. I stayed grounded. When I was jobless during COVID, 2 pastoral jobs opened up in our small town. I prayed and prayed that God would give me one of those jobs. I interviewed multiple times with different groups of leaders in both churches. The process took months and months and many conversations. God was loud about that one, and again, it was a no. I know it was God who said no, and that's because of the timing. After months of waiting, it was within 2 hours, on one random September day. Both churches emailed me to tell me they were choosing other people. I wanted God to answer with a resounding yes. I wanted him to speak into the storm of my fears and desires and quiet them. I wanted a miraculous intervention, something that proved I was wanted, I was valuable, and that this was the path. But it wasn't. All I was left with was his no. I was left to wonder what God wanted from me, if anything, anymore. It's hard when God is quiet, when he doesn't stand up in the boat and command the storm to stop. It's hard when he approaches us with a still small voice, and even harder when that voice tells us no. I wonder if there are times when God is speaking to us, but we're just not picking it up. We spend so much energy trying to get God to respond when it feels like He isn't answering us. And maybe all the time, He's been speaking a different language altogether. Maybe He's speaking in a language that He wants us to learn to speak as well. What if His voice is different than what we believe it to be? What if God speaks to the world, to our circumstances, when we love our neighbors and our neighbors love us? What if His voice is that love? What if God speaks to us through opportunities and openings that He's inviting us to take? What if His voice is the tangible beauty of the world, spoken in rivers and forests, birdsong and towering mountains, and quiet pastures? I mean, how many stories are there in the Bible of people going away into the wilderness, fleeing, and finding Him there? Elijah fled. He was afraid for his life, and he ran out into the wilderness saying, "I've had enough, Lord, no more." He fell asleep in a cave on the mountain of God, and then the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a still, small voice, a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave and waited for the Lord to approach. We want God to be louder, more present, more real to us. Show up in the fire, the quake, the wind. Show up if you care, we say. And sometimes in our grief, we yell it. Because if He won't speak loudly or clearly to us, we will certainly speak clearly and loudly to Him. But I wonder if the still small voice of God is also an invitation. The unexpected, small voice, the gentle whisper, a gift for new purpose, like it was with Elijah in his story. What if even the feeling of silence or God's flat-out no is an invitation to something new, a deeper conversation with God, a deeper relationship where our worries and wounds and needs and love are discussed in the safety of friendship? What if God's purposes are never meant to harm the relationship, but always, always to further it? Because even though God answers yes sometimes and no other times, He is always answering. And every time He answers, He is still saying, "I am here." Can we be brave enough, even in what feels like silence, to say the same to Him? Join me in our breath prayer today. Inhale. Still small voice. And exhale. I am here. And again. Inhale. Still small voice. And exhale. I am here. I want to know your story. I want to know how you desired God to be louder in your life. If you'd like to share your story with us or even join us on the podcast, we would love to hear from you. Reach out to us on the Whisper and Flame Facebook page, the Instagram page, or send us an email at whisperandflame. That's whisper, the letter N, flame, @gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining me today for Ember 11. I thought you'd be louder. Pick up a copy of Ember's 30 Days for Holding What Remains from our website. Allow me to bless you as we depart for now. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and bring you peace. Join me tomorrow for day 12 of Ember's A Sacred Silence. Before you go, remember, even the grave is not godless, but a child's lost and found. You, yes, you are beloved, every scar, holy ground.